small bodies on stretchers, white sheets stained with tears. The acrid smell of tear gas lingering in the afternoon air as paramedics rushed 8 children toward waiting ambulances, their faces red and swollen. Their birthday celebration transformed into a nightmare that would haunt Willowbrook forever. Just 3 hours earlier, sunshine had filtered through the tall windows of Serenity Haven Children's Home, casting golden rectangles across the worn but lovingly maintained hardwood floors. 7-year-old Marcus pressed his face against the glass, his breath fogging the window as he watched volunteers arrive with balloons, streamers, and a birthday cake decorated with rainbow sprinkles. "Is that really for me?" Sarah Chen, the orphanage director, knelt beside him, her gentle smile warming the room more than the morning sun. She had run Serenity Haven for 12 years, transforming what was once a cold institutional facility into something resembling a real home. The children called her Miss Sarah, and she knew each of their stories, their fears, their dreams. "Every bit of it, sweetheart. It's your special day." Marcus had never had a real birthday party. Born to a teenage mother who disappeared when he was 3, he had spent 4 years bouncing between foster homes before finding stability at Serenity Haven. The other children gathered around him, their excitement infectious. 10-year-old Isabella, who had been rescued from an abusive situation 6 months ago, carefully arranged the party hats. Twin brothers Jake and Joel, both 9 and survivors of neglect, helped blow up balloons with the dedication of master craftsmen. The volunteers were members of the Willowbrook Community Alliance, a group Sarah had cultivated over the years to support the orphanage. There was Mrs. Rodriguez from the Corner Bakery, who donated bread weekly, college student volunteers from the nearby university, and several retired teachers who came to read stories. Today, they had transformed the main living room into a wonderland of color and joy. "I've never seen the children this happy," whispered volunteer coordinator David Kim to Sarah as they watched the preparations. Music played softly from a portable speaker, and the sound of children's laughter filled the air like the most beautiful symphony. But across the street, behind pristine white curtains and perfectly manicured rose bushes, Karen Whitfield watched with growing irritation. She had moved to Elmwood Avenue 3 months ago, specifically choosing the upscale neighborhood for its quiet, family-friendly reputation. The presence of the orphanage, she felt, was a blight on property values and neighborhood character. Karen was 43, recently divorced, and working as a real estate agent. She had cultivated an image of suburban perfection, with her blonde hair always styled, her clothes always pressed, and her opinions always loud. She belonged to the Homeowners Association, had filed 17 complaints with City Hall about various neighborhood infractions, and considered herself a guardian of community standards. As the morning progressed and more volunteers arrived, Karen's agitation grew. She counted 12 cars parked along the street, noted the colorful decorations visible through the orphanage windows, and listened to the sounds of celebration with increasing displeasure. In her mind, she constructed a narrative of disruption and disorder. "This is getting out of hand," she muttered to herself, pacing in front of her living room window. The sight of happy children apparently offended her sensibilities more than she cared to admit, even to herself. Inside Serenity Haven, the party was in full swing. Marcus wore a paper crown that kept sliding down over his eyes, making him giggle uncontrollably. The children had formed a circle around him as he tried to blow out 7 candles, his cheeks puffed with determination. "Make a wish, Marcus," called out Isabella, clapping her hands. The little boy closed his eyes tight, his face scrunched in concentration. When he opened them and blew out the candles in one breath, The room erupted in cheers. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. These children had been through so much, yet they could still find pure joy in simple moments. "What did you wish for?" asked Jake. "I can't tell you, or it won't come true, but it's about all of us." Marcus replied solemnly, wisdom beyond his years evident in his dark eyes. The children began playing games, their voices rising in excitement. They played musical chairs, pinned the tail on the donkey, and had a dance contest that left everyone breathless with laughter. The volunteers watched with warm hearts, many of them taking photos to preserve these precious memories. But Karen's tolerance had reached its limit. At exactly 2:47 p.m., she picked up her phone and dialed 911. Her voice was sharp and authoritative when the dispatcher answered. "I need to report a disturbance at 347 Elmwood Avenue. There's some kind of mob gathering here. Loud music, crowds of people, and it looks like they're getting out of control. I can see children running around unsupervised, and I think I heard shouting. This looks like gang activity or some kind of illegal gathering. You need to send someone immediately." The emergency dispatcher, following protocol, asked for more details. Karen embellished freely, describing a chaotic scene of disorder and potential violence. She mentioned seeing suspicious individuals and threatening behavior that existed only in her prejudiced imagination. "Ma'am, are you in immediate danger?" "I don't know what these people are capable of. There are dozens of them, and they're making a lot of noise. I'm concerned for the safety of the neighborhood children. Please hurry." Karen hung up, feeling satisfied that she had taken decisive action to protect her community. In her twisted logic, she believed she was being a responsible citizen. The fact that she was about to destroy the happiest day in several children's lives never occurred to her. 17 minutes later, 3 police cars arrived on Elmwood Avenue, their sirens wailing. Officer Michael Torres was the first to step out, hand resting on his weapon as he surveyed the scene. He had been told to expect a potentially dangerous gathering, possibly gang-related. Instead, he saw colorful balloons tied to the orphanage fence and heard what sounded like children singing. "Control. This is Unit 23. The scene appears to be some kind of children's party at a residential facility, requesting clarification on the nature of the disturbance." But Sergeant Ray Holbrook had already made his assessment. A 20-year veteran with a reputation for aggressive tactics, he saw the crowd of volunteers and children as a potential riot waiting to happen. His training told him to establish control first and ask questions later. "We have reports of mob activity and threats to public safety. We need to disperse this gathering immediately." Sarah Chen came to the front door, confused by the sudden appearance of police vehicles. She was still wearing a party hat, her face flushed from laughing with the children. "Officers, is there some kind of problem? We're just having a birthday party for one of our children." Sergeant Holbrook's voice was cold and commanding. "Ma'am, we've received reports of a disturbance. I need everyone to exit the building immediately for a safety check." "I don't understand. These are children, and we have proper permits for our facility. What kind of disturbance?" Sarah's confusion was evident, but Holbrook interpreted her questions as resistance to authority. Officer Torres felt uneasy about the escalating situation, but his sergeant's next words froze his blood. "Deploy the gas. Clear the building now." "Sarge, these are kids in there." "That's an order. Torres." The first canister crashed through the living room window at exactly 3:15 p.m. Marcus was reaching for another piece of birthday cake when the world exploded in chaos. Acrid white smoke poured into the room, burning his eyes and throat. The other children began screaming, not understanding why their celebration had turned into terror. Isabella grabbed Marcus's hand as they stumbled toward the back of the building, coughing violently. Jake and Joel cried out for each other in the confusion, their young voices barely audible over the sound of breaking glass and shouted orders. The volunteers tried desperately to help the children evacuate, but the tear gas made it nearly impossible to see or breathe. Sarah Chen felt her heart breaking as she heard her children's frightened cries. She tried to reach them through the smoke, her eyes streaming tears from both the gas and the emotional devastation of watching their safe haven violated. "Please, they're just children. Stop this." She screamed at the officers, but her voice was lost in the chaos. More canisters followed. The beautiful birthday decorations caught fire, filling the room with additional smoke. The rainbow-sprinkled cake lay smashed on the floor, ground under the boots of tactical officers who had stormed the building expecting to find criminals and instead found terrified children. Outside, neighbors began to gather, drawn by the sounds of breaking glass and children screaming. Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman who had lived on Elmwood Avenue for 40 years, stood on her porch in shock. "What are they doing to those children?" she asked her husband, her voice shaking. Karen Whitfield watched from her window, a smile of satisfaction playing on her lips. In her mind, justice was being served. The disruptive gathering was being handled by proper authorities, and her neighborhood would return to its desired tranquility. But her satisfaction began to waver as she saw small figures being carried out on stretchers. These weren't the threatening gang members she had described to the dispatcher. These were children, some barely school age, their faces red and swollen from chemical exposure. Marcus was among the first to be loaded into an ambulance. The little boy who had been so excited about his birthday party now lay gasping for breath, his paper crown crumpled in his small fist. The paramedic working on him was visibly angry. Who the hell authorized gas against children? He demanded of Officer Torres, who stood by helplessly watching the aftermath of a decision he knew was wrong. Sarah Chen rode in the first ambulance, holding Isabella's hand as the 10-year-old struggled to breathe. The girl who had finally begun to trust adults again after months of abuse was once again experiencing trauma at the hands of those supposed to protect her. "Miss Sarah, why did they hurt us? What did we do wrong?" Isabella whispered between coughs. Sarah had no answer. Her throat was raw from the gas and from crying. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the anguish of seeing her children suffer for no reason other than someone's prejudice and law enforcement's failure to assess a situation properly. The hospital emergency room was overwhelmed as 8 children and 4 adults were brought in suffering from tear gas exposure. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had been working in emergency medicine for 15 years, but she had never treated children for chemical weapons exposure in a domestic setting. "I need to know exactly what they were exposed to," she demanded of the officers who accompanied the ambulances. "Standard riot control gas," Sergeant Holbrook replied curtly. "On children at a birthday party." "Doctor," Walsh's voice carried both disbelief and fury. "We responded to reports of mob activity." Mob activity. These are orphans from Serenity Haven. I know Sarah Chen personally. She runs the most respected children's facility in the county. As news of the incident spread through social media, 17-year-old journalism student Maria Santos arrived at the scene with her camera. She had been monitoring police scanners for her school newspaper when she heard about the response to Elmwood Avenue. What she found and photographed would change everything. Maria's camera captured the smashed birthday cake, the torn streamers, the broken windows, and, most damning of all, Karen Whitfield standing in her front yard, clearly visible and animated, speaking to neighbors about how she had done the right thing by calling the police. "I reported suspicious activity, and the police handled it appropriately," Karen was saying to anyone who would listen. "This neighborhood has standards, and we can't let it be overrun by undesirable elements." Maria's recording captured every word, along with Karen's satisfied expression as she watched the children being loaded into ambulances. The footage would become crucial evidence in the investigation that followed. By evening, the story had exploded across social media. The images of children on stretchers, their birthday party destroyed by tear gas, sparked outrage across the nation. The hashtag Justice for Marcus began trending as people shared Maria's photographs and demanded accountability. Television news trucks arrived in Willowbrook by midnight. Reporter Jessica Chen, no relation to Sarah, stood outside Serenity Haven with the damaged building behind her, illuminated by camera lights. This is the scene where earlier today, police used tear gas to break up what they thought was a dangerous gathering. In reality, it was a birthday party for 7-year-old Marcus Williams, an orphan who just wanted to celebrate with his friends. The story was picked up by national networks within hours. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and every major outlet covered the incident. Public opinion was swift and decisive. This was an unconscionable use of force against innocent children, sparked by what appeared to be a malicious false report. Karen Whitfield woke up the next morning to find protesters gathered outside her home. Someone had identified her as the caller through investigation of the 911 records, and her name and address had been shared online. Signs reading "Child Abuser" and "Shame on Karen" filled her front yard. She called the police to complain about the protesters, but the response was notably different from the previous day. "Ma'am, as long as they remain on public property and don't threaten violence, they have a right to peaceful protest." The desk sergeant informed her coldly. "But they're calling me names. This is harassment. Like calling the police on children having a birthday party. Ma'am." The sergeant's tone made it clear where his sympathies lay. Karen's real estate office began receiving hundreds of negative reviews and phone calls. Her broker, David Matthews, called an emergency meeting. "Karen, I don't know what you were thinking, but this company cannot be associated with what happened yesterday. I'm placing you on administrative leave pending a full review." "You can't do this to me. I was protecting the community. You sent children to the hospital because you didn't like the sound of their laughter. That's not protecting anyone. That's cruelty." Meanwhile, at Willowbrook General Hospital, Marcus was finally stable enough for visitors. Sarah Chen sat beside his bed, reading him the thousands of get well cards that had arrived from around the world. The little boy's eyes were still red, but he managed a weak smile. "Miss Sarah, are all those cards really for me?" "Every single one, sweetheart. People everywhere heard about what happened, and they want you to know they care." Isabella was in the next bed, holding a teddy bear sent by a family in California. Despite her physical recovery, the emotional trauma was evident. She flinched every time someone entered the room too quickly, and she had barely spoken since the incident. Dr. Walsh examined the children daily, monitoring not just their physical recovery, but their psychological state. She had contacted child trauma specialists, knowing that the impact of this incident would last far longer than their physical symptoms. "They're going to need extensive counseling," she told Sarah privately. These children have already been through so much, and now they've been traumatized by the very people who should protect them. The investigation into the incident moved quickly. Internal Affairs. Detective Carmen Rodriguez interviewed every officer involved, reviewed the 911 call recordings, and examined Maria Santos's photographs and video footage. Sergeant Holbrook, help me understand your decision-making process. You arrived at the scene and saw children's birthday decorations, yet you still authorized the use of chemical weapons. The 911 caller reported mob activity and potential violence. I assess the situation as requiring immediate action to maintain public safety. Did you actually observe any threatening behavior, or did you rely solely on the caller's description? Sergeant Holbrook's silence was telling. Officer Torres cooperated fully with the investigation, expressing his regret about following orders he knew were wrong. I should have refused the order to deploy gas. I could see it was a children's party, but I was trained to follow my sergeant's commands. That's no excuse for what happened to those kids. The district attorney's office announced they would be pursuing charges against Karen Whitfield for filing a false police report, reckless endangerment of children, and several other felonies. The announcement came during a press conference attended by dozens of media outlets. District Attorney Patricia Williams stood behind a podium covered with microphones, her expression stern. The evidence clearly shows that Ms. Whitfield knowingly provided false information to emergency services, describing a peaceful birthday party as mob activity and potential gang violence. Her actions directly led to the hospitalization of 8 children who were simply trying to celebrate a classmate's birthday. Karen's attorney, public defender Michael Chen, tried to argue that his client had made an honest mistake in her perception of the situation, but the video evidence of Karen's proud confession to neighbors undermined any claim of innocent misunderstanding. Your Honor, my client may have overreacted to what she perceived as a disturbance, but there was no malicious intent. He argued during the bail hearing. Judge Sandra Torres, a mother of 3 herself, was not convinced. Mr. Chen, your client's own words, captured on video, indicate she was proud of her actions and showed no concern for the children who were injured as a result. She refers to orphans as undesirable elements and celebrates their trauma. This suggests a level of callousness that concerns this court regarding public safety. Karen's bail was set at $50,000, and she was ordered to have no contact with Serenity Haven or any of the children involved. The community response was overwhelming. A GoFundMe campaign to support Serenity Haven raised over $2 million within a week. Donations of toys, books, clothes, and offers of volunteer time poured in from across the country. Most remarkably, hundreds of families reached out expressing interest in adopting the children or providing foster care. The tragedy had unexpectedly opened doors that had been closed for years. Marcus's case was particularly touching. The Yamamoto family, owners of a small restaurant chain, had been trying to adopt for years, but had faced bureaucratic obstacles. The publicity surrounding Marcus's story brought their case to the attention of adoption advocates who helped expedite the process. We saw his picture in the hospital, wearing that paper crown, and we knew he belonged with us. Kenji Yamamoto told reporters after the adoption was finalized. No child should have to go through what Marcus experienced, but his courage and resilience inspired us. Isabella was matched with Dr. Walsh, who had fallen in love with the brave little girl during her treatment. The adoption process was fast-tracked due to the circumstances, and Isabella found herself in a loving home with someone who understood her trauma and was committed to her healing. Jake and Joel were adopted together by the Rodriguez family, who had seen their story on the news and immediately contacted Serenity Haven. Maria Rodriguez, a former teacher, had experience working with children who had experienced trauma. All 8 children affected by the incident found permanent homes within 6 months, their lives transformed by the very publicity that had documented their worst day. Karen Whitfield's trial became a media spectacle. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of her malicious intent, including the 911 recording, video of her celebration of the police action, and testimony from neighbors about her pattern of complaints against the orphanage. The most damaging testimony came from her own homeowners association meeting minutes, where she had repeatedly referred to the children as those people and had proposed various schemes to force the closure of Serenity Haven. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Judge Torres sentenced Karen to 3 years in prison, 5 years of probation, and ordered her to pay restitution to all affected families. Ms. Whitfield, your actions demonstrated a callous disregard for the welfare of innocent children. You turned a celebration into a trauma, and you showed no remorse for the pain you caused. Society expects better from its members, and this sentence reflects the seriousness of your crimes against the most vulnerable among us. Karen's final statement to the court showed no genuine remorse. I still believe I was protecting my neighborhood. I never intended for children to be hurt, but I had a right to report what I considered suspicious activity. Her words only reinforced the judge's decision. Sergeant Holbrook was terminated from the police force and faced his own criminal charges for excessive use of force. Officer Torres received a suspension and mandatory retraining, but kept his job after his cooperation with the investigation and his testimony against his former sergeant. The incident led to significant reforms in police protocols for responding to complaints about gatherings. New training emphasized the importance of assessment before action, and strict guidelines were implemented for the use of chemical weapons. 1 year later, the Willowbrook Community Alliance organized a memorial celebration at the site where Serenity Haven once stood. The building had been demolished and replaced with a small park dedicated to the children who had suffered there. Marcus, now 8 and thriving with his new family, helped unveil a plaque that read, "In memory of innocence interrupted, and in celebration of resilience restored. May we never forget that every child deserves protection, not prejudice." Sarah Chen, who had moved to a new city to start fresh, but remained in contact with all her children, spoke at the dedication. What happened here was a tragedy born of hatred and misunderstanding. But what followed was beautiful, a community that came together to protect its most vulnerable members and to ensure that love would triumph over fear. Isabella, now 11 and confident in her new home with Dr. Walsh, read a poem she had written about forgiveness and second chances. Her words brought tears to the hundreds of people gathered for the ceremony. The twins, Jake and Joel, played on the new playground equipment, their laughter echoing where once there had been fear and chaos. Their recovery was perhaps the most complete, their resilience buoyed by their new family's unwavering love and support. As the ceremony concluded and families began to disperse, Marcus approached the memorial plaque one more time. He placed a small birthday candle at its base and made a wish, the same wish he had made on his 7th birthday, before his world was shattered. His wish had been simple then, and remained simple now that all children would have a place where they felt safe, loved, and celebrated. In the most unexpected way, that wish had come true, not just for him, but for all the children whose lives were forever changed by one woman's hatred and the community's response with love. The story of Marcus's birthday party became a turning point in conversations about prejudice, community responsibility, and the protection of vulnerable populations. It reminded people that behind every 911 call should be a genuine concern for safety, not a desire to silence joy or eliminate those deemed different. Karen Whitfield served her full sentence, spending 3 years reflecting on the consequences of her actions. Upon release, she found herself isolated in a community that remembered what she had done to innocent children. She eventually moved far away, but the internet ensured that her story followed her, a permanent reminder that cruelty toward children will not be forgotten or forgiven. The children, however, thrived. They grew up in loving homes, pursued their dreams, and many became advocates for other vulnerable children. Marcus studied law, inspired by the attorneys who had fought for justice in his case. Isabella became a doctor like her adoptive mother, committed to healing trauma in others. The twins started a nonprofit organization focused on helping children in difficult transitions. Their success was the ultimate vindication proof that love, properly applied, can overcome even the worst that humanity has to offer. The birthday party that began in joy was interrupted by hatred and concluded with justice, became a symbol of resilience and hope that continued to inspire people years later. In the end, one woman's attempt to silence children's laughter had instead amplified it, ensuring that Marcus and his friends would be heard, protected, and celebrated for the rest of their lives. The call that was meant to destroy innocence had instead preserved it, creating a legacy of love that would outlast any attempt to diminish it.